Good evening and welcome to the Arizona Project Special Edition. Due to technical difficulties, tonight's live program will not be seen. In its place, please enjoy Think Twice, Socialism Destroys the Human Spirit with host Tim Horn. Also, please be mindful of the social leftist riots and uncontrolled behavior being promoted in nationwide Democratic-controlled blue states, funded by special interest groups and wealthy individuals with an agenda to dismantle our great republic. Please enjoy tonight's show.
Welcome to Think Twice, a program that's designed to challenge your mind. I'm your host, Tim Horn. My job is to inform you about important subjects of the day to the point where you may want to step back from a preconception and dare to think about it again. This is the first in a series of shows we'll present on the topic of socialism. As always, we'll look at the subject with you, hoping to challenge your preconception either way. What we'll cover in this series could surprise you, startle you, or it may confirm what you already think. Let the challenge begin. To address the topic of socialism, which is often mentioned in the daily news, we'll first establish some definitions and glance back at history for context. Then we'll interview people with direct experience on the subject, and then we'll wrap it all up with my personal commentary. Let's get started. Socialism is a complex issue, so we'll offer some definition to anchor our conversation. According to Britannica Online, socialism is a social and economic doctrine that seeks to control property and natural resources. It also seeks to control the production of all goods and services and the distribution of whatever is produced. It's actually an older idea, but its modern political roots are from the era of the Industrial Revolution in the early 1800s. At that time, England led the rapid major economic changes caused by increasing the scale of manufacturing and substituting coal and petroleum energy for less efficient water and animal power in the production of goods. Coal would be used to produce power where there were no rivers for water power. Petroleum would power trucks instead of horses. The capitalists aggregated money to afford to build large factories to mass-produce products cheaply so as to charge lower prices. Many Americans also sought to build wealth through market forces and profit. Higher pay offered in the city factories drew the rural populations and swelled American cities. Many agrarians despised both the resultant city squalor and its disruptive capitalist creators. These American anti-capitalists wanted a collectivist society, more like the failed colonial Jamestown, that would be based on economic control by knowledgeable people and science, not markets and profits. The foundations of socialism were formed early in the 1800s. Influenced by many writers about the possibilities of socialist environments, new collectivist settlements began. New Harmony, Indiana was one such experimental American socialist town. It was created in 1825 by a wealthy textile industrialist. It failed, and a fortune was lost. As the decades passed, leftist writers presented appealing improvements to the economic theory of socialism, including guaranteed government work and ending private property. We will continue with the history of socialism after this break. Let's continue with the history of socialism. In 1848, two Germans, Karl Marx along with his benefactor Friedrich Engels, authored the seminal socialist pamphlet called the Communist Manifesto. Later, the pair produced the detailed book Das Kapital. They labeled all earlier socialists as utopians and promoted their claim that socialism/communism, Marx believed those two terms to be interchangeable, could only be achieved by a conflict of the social classes. Based on Marx's favorite German philosopher, George Hegel, this struggle was to be between those who owned land and the means of production, he called them the bourgeoisie, and those who did not, he called them the proletariat. The war he envisioned would replace the bourgeoisie with a government which would become the dictator of the proletariat. Over the century and a half since the Communist Manifesto was written, many governments have adopted various forms of socialist economic theory. Russia, under Stalin, implemented a modified version of Lenin's highly controlled socialist plan. America was founded as a capitalist system based on market forces and profit without collective government ownership of the production and distribution. However, the American government provides economic regulation as well as economic support for people that are unable to prosper. That support has expanded over its past 100 years, and some view that as flirting with socialism. In its pure form, Marxist socialism had the proletariat workers as the largest class. Marx called the second smaller class the dictatorship of the proletariat body, which is composed of the dictator and the elites who surround him, much like a king who is surrounded by his key supporters. These numerous workers would be given the ownership of the land and the means of production, but the control over the land and factories would be by a relative few who ran the government on their behalf and for the protection of the people. The majority of the ordinary non-controlling citizens lose freedom and create little wealth or future, live sparsely, have low or no cost basic health coverage, have high infant mortality rates, and lower lifespans. The other smaller ruling class, controlling the workers, have more freedom, create wealth, live more extravagantly, and have better health care. They have lower infant mortality and higher longevity. Today, most governments fall somewhere on a continuum between pure capitalism on the right and pure socialism theory on the left. The economic systems determine the level of freedom, reward, and security the many ordinary people receive from the few who are in actual control. We know about living in a nation that's mostly to the right, but most have nothing to compare that experience to. What would it be like living in a nation that is more socialist? Well, today, we'll have the opportunity to find out. In a moment, I'm going to talk to a person who's done just that when we return from this break. So, what is it like to grow up in a more controlled socialist nation? Nepal is an example we'll look at today. This nation of about 32 million is located between the southern border of China and the northern border of India, and it's home to the world's tallest mountain, Mount Everest. Nepal had a 2-century history as a Hindu monarchy, which came under British rule and then became completely independent in 1923. The royal family regained control as a constitutional monarchy, but under pressure from armed communist militants roaming the countryside, power was ceded to a new federal democratic republic in 2008. In 2011, the chairman of the Communist Party of Nepal was elected prime minister. It remains a socialist, secular nation today. We're in a series of interviewing young people from other countries. I want to thank Project Arizona for helping put this together. Today, I've got Kamala Neopane, and she is from Nepal, a country that not a lot of Americans know a whole lot about. I've learned a little bit that Nepal has been a monarchy. Historically, it's been a monarchy. It was never controlled by the British. I made that mistake of thinking that it was, and that's not true. But they did fight along India when they were trying to gain their independence from Britain. And everybody knows about the Gurkhas, and they're from Nepal. So is Kamala. So let's get talking to her. Kamala, you're 24 years old.
Yes.
And you saw the change from your country being a monarchy and moving into becoming socialist.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
So for me, it was like for Nepalese people, it was like not so similar. Like it's ruled by king and like lots of dictatorship, I must say. And after that, Nepalese people fought a lot to get into the democracy. So we are a socialist democratic country, I must say. So yeah, it's been like bird flying in the open sky. You know what I mean?
It's like what?
Bird flying in the open sky. It's like freedom and lots of things. But The thing is that it's for like this like Nepalese people feel that liberty and freedom for a short period of time because our government changed, and then it's nowadays it's ruled by the communist people, communist party, so we don't have much freedom. It's like
How
that.
did the Communist Party get control of Nepal?
It's a history that like Nepalese politics are always influenced by either China or India.
Influenced by China
yeah,
and India.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the communists, they are always much more influenced by China rather than India, and they are much more dictator. They want to govern people, and everything is like if you see the history of Nepal, like we don't have independent system, like we don't have independent monetary system, we don't have independent legislative system. It's everything is governed by the government. It's like that.
So the government controls your economy and
Yes.
business.
Yes.
Are they a lot of regulations about your personal life?
Yeah, a lot of there is no like individual freedom. What is like in America or like in other country, but like
How so? Give me an example.
like if you need to be like monitor every time. You don't have like freedom of speech.
Freedom of
Yeah,
speech.
you don't have freedom of expression.
No
Even
expression.
yeah, like it's like we have lots of caste and class system,
Oh,
like
yeah.
I must say. And if I belong to a high caste and high class, I'm not allowed to marry a low caste or a low class guy. So they will punish me, and it's like that. You, they are going to govern everyone. You know, like they want to regulate everyone, every individual like that. Another example is that like I'm not being a girl, I'm not allowed to work during the nighttime. Nighttime.
Why?
It's rules. It's a
it's a
rules.
rule.
Yeah. Like after 12, I'm not
It's
allowed
because
to work.
because you're a woman.
Yes, I'm a girl. That's why.
Oh, you're a girl. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a woman, so you can't work at night.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yes.
Men can.
Men can. So it's a government rule. So
Are you controlled like I hear? I know people are in Saudi Arabia, where women can't go without an escort and that sort of thing. Is there that?
it's not like that, but Nepal is a patriarchal society. It's a
Patriarchal.
Malayalam, and that's the reason. Like, if I get married, like even if I have my youngest brother with me, like my family will say, like most of their family will say, take your brother with you when you go outside. They are like driven by a man, and they say, oh, you are a girl, don't do this. Or like, I want to go to high school, or else I want to go to clubbing with my friends. No, you are a girl. Don't do
You're
that.
a girl, you can't
Yeah.
go clubbing. You
Yes.
can't. Yeah, how about education? Is it also difficult as a woman to get educated?
It is so difficult to get education in Nepal for a female. That is why
Even
I
an upper
advocate
class
like-
female?
Yeah. But it's even like every female, not from upper caste and not from the lower caste. So it's like it is nowadays. Kathmandu are like capital of Nepal.
Yes.
From that place, people are most like encouraging female education. But if you see outside of like Kathmandu Valley, it's so hard to get a girl education. So
Outside
hard
of
for them, yeah.
Kathmandu, the capital, it's more
Yes,
difficult.
so difficult to get girls' education, and they said like there is no use to educate girls' child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that. So
How about in the workforce? Then, if you do get an education, is the workforce amenable to having women in it?
it is so biased, I must say. So they said they have their one perspective. They said like, oh, girls are the factory to produce a child, nothing more.
No, they're what?
They are the factory, they are a machine to produce a child, nothing more. They said like that. So why do we need a girl or a female or women to work in our company? Go to your house and just be in kitchen. You're
Work
like
it,
that.
work it out, work
Yeah.
at the kitchen.
So they treat
Right.
female as in such a bad way. It's like that.
So, how do you find America when you look at how women are treated here?
Oh wow, I love America. Like you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of expression. You can work whatever you like. I heard.
You can go to clubs, too.
Yes. Oh my god, it's like that. Like I have heard a lots of story from my friend over here in America. They said, "Oh, over here, like male are much more biased from female." They said like that. I said, oh my God, it's interesting." And they said, like female, if female like can female say anything to male, but male can't say anything to female, like
Yeah.
a country. It's like that.
Well, unfortunately, I disagree with that because
Really?
it's swung so far that I'm a person who's written and talked about how everybody
Oh,
must
wow.
be treated equally, the same by our government. And it would solve a lot of our problems that we have here. We have problems
Yeah.
too, and that's one of them. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be the other way. It shouldn't be the way you're saying
Yeah.
either. So I want to get to one thing that happened because this is something that is going to stun you, but it happened while she's been visiting here in the United States. And so quickly, because I don't want to run out of time, she went out and was filmed, videotaped, shooting a gun for the first time, which is something she has never done,
Yes.
never even thought she could do in her country, and probably you can't, I guess.
Yes.
But so she went out and had filmed. She posted on her Facebook page. And why don't you tell us what happened?
Yes, I'm here for the project called Project Arizona, and like if I say the history of why I got selected in Project Arizona, I'm a freedom fighter from Nepal.
So she's saying, if you didn't get that, she's a freedom fighter from Nepal.
Yeah. So I love to advocate about the things, good things, like freedom of speech, right, and expression from my early childhood when I was 16 and got by some, like we have some political problem in Nepal. That from that time I always advocate about. I love to advocate about freedom of speech, expression, and girls' education mostly. So I was here and I got an opportunity to go to shooting with my friends, and I said, "Oh my God, it's a good time to take a video and post that in Facebook." I did that, and I made a short video saying that guns should be legalized in Nepal.
You said that?
Yes, I said that, and because of the following reason, and the reason is so good. You
And
know?
what did you tell them? Why should guns be legal in
So
Nepal?
I said that it's for the self-defense, like because Nepal is in between China and India, and
Yes.
you know that China and India don't have a good relationship.
That's right.
And another thing is that Nepal is so connected with Pakistan as well, and India and Pakistan don't have good relation like that. So and then, like we have open border in India and Nepal. So every time, at any time, Indian people can attack Nepalese people. I don't believe Indian government much. So I said, "Oh, guns should be legalized in Nepal just for the self-defense, And
Okay.
the main rule of democratic country is like self-defense. It's a fundamental thing."
Got
I
it.
said that thing. So another thing what I said is like we have high domestic violence. So just for a female, guns should be legalized in Nepal, and government should teach female how to use gun. I said those things, like a simple things.
So what happened to her, because we're almost out of time, what happened to her is her government got in touch with her and wanted her to take that Facebook interview
Video.
down. She
Yes.
wanted that video down. She refused to. And now she has an arrest warrant issued by her country that she's got to
Yes.
face upon return.
Yes, and then that is the fact, and yeah, I'm just waiting for the time, good time to go back, and let's see what will happen for me.
So a freedom fighter from Nepal, a female freedom fighter from Nepal. Boy, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, wow.
But we want to thank Kamala for coming today because it's so unusual to hear a voice like this in our country. There is some solid information directly from someone who has lived it. So, what can we take away from what we've just shared today? My commentary after this break. During this show, we've looked at the topic of socialism, a term we now hear on the news constantly throughout America. We presented a simple definition, examined its history, and interviewed a citizen who was raised in a socialist nation. As an American, I was raised in a nation not based on pure socialism, but rather controlled by the citizens and market forces, a more capitalist system, but having constantly expanding socialist characteristics. From my view, it is hard not to like something like the idea of socialism. It offers a promise that is so emotionally appealing. Plenty of food, free healthcare, free education, and the essentials and risks of life just provided for. Worry is melted away. But as we've seen, the roots of this theory are about struggle and conflict. It seems to require disruption and class conflict to come into being and tight government control to be maintained. In our guest's home country, Nepal, many were killed. Ultimately, the socialists used the elected positions to take over the government, then used it to revise the history of its past, reform its present, and redirect its future. To me, the results for ordinary people seem unimpressive at best. China, long a socialist nation, adopted more capitalist regulations for its socialist state in 1978 and has famously lifted 800 million people from poverty in the past 40 years. But by American standards, the average city annual household income of $4,500 American dollars, an average rural income of only $1,500 American dollars a year, would mean that on average, ordinary Chinese are still poor. I think China is the contemporary model of a modern socialist government. It labels itself a democratic dictatorship in which the people voted to establish and maintain an authoritarian government. The Communist Party there acts on behalf of the people to protect them from any external or internal threats to the arrangement. For the people's good, it also protects itself from anything that would oppose the party. Part of that party protection includes a social score, intolerance for any criticism of the party or government, and open persecution of religions. The Social Credit Score, the SCS, will be fully implemented by the end of 2020 and will publicly rank all 1.2 billion Chinese citizens according to social connections, consumption behavior, security, wealth, and compliance to all the standards of the Communist Party. The score will reflect all of an ordinary citizen's activities and interactions and will determine an individual's worth as a human being.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete. The purpose of this hearing is to make a finding in the matter and make a sentence accordingly. Do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Your occupation, Mr. Wordsworth?
A librarian, sir.
A librarian. Having to do with books.
Yes, sir. Books.
Since there are no more books, Mr. Wordsworth, there are no more libraries. The field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. Your rights are as follows, Mr. Wordsworth. You are to be liquidated within a period of 48 hours. You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth.
The party will use that score to decide where an ordinary Chinese citizen can work and travel, if they can assemble with others, and likely it'll be used to determine access to healthcare and to education. This will make China the most highly developed model of the authoritarian state. The government there gets bigger, the individual is diminished, and all are told it is for the better and for their own good. Critics of the socialist model note that the freedom of an ordinary citizen to decide what is best for themselves and their family is lost, as is the ability to do what they find human joy in doing. How they'll speak and even think becomes increasingly controlled by others, and they are told what constitutes happiness. Detractors believe that socialism is all about the control of the many ordinary citizens for the benefit of the few in control, and simply against what humans naturally desire. We can see that the growing pushback against socialism now in Cuba, in Venezuela, in England, in Poland, in Ukraine, and even at some level here in America, is happening. In future shows, we will examine this more and will speak with citizens in many of the more authoritarian socialist states to help make more clear what socialism is all about. If you began this show today in favor of socialism or against it, now that you know more, let me ask you, do you think twice or should you think twice about your position? Not convinced either way? Our next show will include details from my personal interview with one of the most famous economists in history. Join us then. I'm Tim Horn for Think Twice.